Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining in. Welcome to Day of Security India Conference. I am Shivangi Singh, and I'll be the speaker for this session. So, I'm a security engineer working with NXP Semiconductors, and today I'm here talking on the topic of taming the cloud for enhanced security posture. So this is what the agenda for the session looks like. We will start with the current threat landscape of the cloud, which we see currently. Then we look at the mitigation steps of like the most common threats that we see around. Then we'll understand the implementation and what CSPM actually means, like one of my favorites from this presentation today. And at the last, we will conclude the session understanding what are the key takeaways from the session and actionable insights from a person in the security industry. Okay, so like looking at this screen, which says we are in the cloud and we are secure. Now, cloud security has been a buzz for about 2 decades now, and with everything moving to cloud, I would like to ask you all: have you in your organization have faced security incidents till date? So there's a poll in the chat that you can see. I would request you all to please put in your responses there. So this is to understand how, like, what have you ever faced a security incident in your organization or not, or how's the like audience we have today? Okay, it's one says no. Okay, come on. I would want your responses to understand what crowd we have. Okay, when okay, we have responses coming in. Great. Trust me, for the people who have said no, surely it has taken place. It's just that you don't know about it. Okay. Uh, few people say no, and majority says no. But like I said, it has happened, and it's just because you don't know, it hasn't come to your visibility. But yeah. So the idea of the cloud. So when it comes to cloud security, it highly depends on what side of the spectrum of the cloud adoption you are in, right? Say if you are on the side where you are using cloud providers like as software as a service, right? For example, Salesforce, then we can say that the security is handled for you in most of the scenarios. But if you use from cloud environment from providers, say AWS, Microsoft, or Google, etc., right? You are taking infrastructure from these cloud providers and you're running your own application in such a scenario. Now when you lie on the this side of the spectrum, right, you have to like deal with a lot of your security in cloud, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So when you say you are in the cloud, it doesn't mean you are actually secure. You are securer compared to your on-premises infrastructure, but it doesn't mean that the security is all taken care of, right? Because cloud operates on a shared responsibility model where the provider and the consumer comes together to ensure the security of the cloud. Okay, so now we know that the cloud is not secure, and I would like to ask and understand what do you think is the number one security problem in the cloud? What is it? So there's a poll, and you can put in your responses for that. What do you think is the top security problem in the cloud today? Anything that you've heard of, have seen in your reports, news articles, or your LinkedIn post, Twitter post, like something that you've heard of related to a security problem in the cloud? No, no responses. Okay. Just wait for a few more seconds. Any more responses that we have? Okay, we have few responses. Okay, I'm gonna close this now. If you have any more suggestion, please put it in the chats. So, okay, I'll quickly check what your answers say. Just a second. Ah, I'm not able to see the results. Okay, cool. But yeah, so if we actually look at the statistics that the industry says today, right now, this is from the IBM report of 2023, which talks about the data breaches, and it says that 82% of the breach that happens, it is through the data which is stored in cloud, be it public clouds, private clouds, your shared, across like shared cloud resources across multiple cloud platforms. And through this 82%, we can, if we look at the amount of cost that is incurred in total, it is an average cost of $4.75 million, and which is huge, right? And when asked for what is the most common reason behind all of this attack, right? Now, this is a report from the Unit 42 from last year, 2023. It says that these are like one of the most common reasons. And if you see, account and credential hijacking and misconfigurations happens to be the top most in the list. And similar is seen for even the cost and frequency of the data breach, which is spent across organizations. So, cloud configuration misconfigurations, if you see, it is not $4; it's in millions. So, it's $4 million, which is spent on an average by every company because of the misconfigurations which are seen in their cloud environment. So this is huge. And if I say what is the today's top cloud challenge, it will be misconfigurations, stolen credentials, and known vulnerabilities, right? And reports across the industry has been saying this. And the reason for me to bring this up is the reason behind these breaches has not been new. This has been there for 5-6 years now. But even though the workloads are increasing, the threat factor behind these breaches have been the same. And this is what we're gonna be focusing on today in our session. So, talking about the various types of misconfiguration that you see across the cloud, it will be default configurations. So, say when you onboard yourself to a cloud environment, there are some settings which are enabled by default, and you as a user, you think that it's a secure environment and you just go by the flow. So there are default configurations that lead to a lot of misconfiguration and deviation from your organizational standard of security. Next is unpatched systems. Unpatched systems, now the problem with this is, since cloud comes in a shared responsibility model, even though when there are patches released from the consumer, from the provider's end, it has to be also done from the consumer's end for the thing to go live. And organizations usually face this problem of either the cost with the patching system, or they have to have a downtime, to support the on-time patch management. And this is seen as one of the biggest problems in the cloud. Now, there are improper access controls, and we see today identity as the first line of defense, right, in the cloud. Gone are the days when firewalls used to be the only line of defense. So there are improper access control, least privilege principle, which we always talk about, is not being followed in the cloud properly, and which we will see how do we solve all of these problems. Next is the unprotected data. Now, data security is one of the main pillars when it comes to cloud security. And the very important part of data security also comes to understand where your data lies and to draw a boundary of your data in your organization. Next is insecure storage. Now, you might have done the sensitivity status of your data, but you are not like where this data is being stored is not secure. So it all goes in vain, and we will see how misconfigurations uh, of these types can be solved through various solutions. Okay, so now that we understand the various threats in the cloud, I would also have a quick check with all of you that I'm sure all of you have been dealing with all of this on a daily day-to-day basis. So I would like to understand from all of you that what does your operational day-to-day challenge while trying to protect your cloud workloads look like? Like what is it that you think is your day-to-day operational headache? I would request you to please put in your responses. Okay, we see responses coming in. How do you mitigate? Yeah. Is it visibility to the threats that you see, or setting the consistent security policies is a big problem, or you are not able to identify the misconfigurations quickly, or is it the compliance issue that you have to maintain, something like a secure score properly and all of those things? So, or what is it for you? Okay, I see a good number of responses now. It's 25% for all. Yeah, so that's correct. I mean, all of that is actually the reason, and we will see how can we get ahead from all these operational headaches, right? So how do we tame the cloud, and which is the important part of this presentation, that how do we solve all of these threats that we see today, especially misconfiguration, which is top on the list. Okay, so nothing fancy. We'll start from very basic. Now, if you see, I'm sure you have seen this bell curve very commonly somewhere or the other, and we start with the basics, and it says that 98% of the attacks that happen today could be could not be like would not happen if you maintain a basic security hygiene through these five pillars, right? I'm gonna not deep dive into that, but we'll just walk through on these five pillars. So first is you enable MFA for your devices. Now this is very important for authentication and authorization purposes for your identities in the organization. Next is to apply least privilege access. Now, whenever a user is granted permission to be on a cloud environment, if it's given by default, then it should be for the least privilege. Otherwise, also, if a user is allowed to expand its access for the cloud environment, there is something called guardrails, which we will talk in the future coming slides, that how we can solve such a scenario also. Keep up to date. Again, patch management is a very important thing, and you need to make sure that you are up to date. Otherwise, if you're not up to date, you're basically failing behind on your security posture. Utilizing anti-malware. It is very important that you have your anti-malware deployed for your devices. Especially with bring your own devices, it's very important to identify the endpoints which are getting connected to your network of the organization. Next is to protect your data. Like I talked about, it is understand. It is you. It is important to understand that you understand the sensitivity of your data, and then prevent and protect it for like from outsiders. Next is to avoid most commonly happening anti patterns that we see, right? And we will go into depth of one by one. Now, the first one is we should be not using the on-prem controls to secure the cloud, right? The controls now for every cloud provider, and there are a lot of frameworks that suggest the frameworks to be followed for cloud. For example, CIS, NIST, even Azure and AWS provide their own. So you should use these controls to manage your cloud resources. Next is securing your workloads after deployment. This should not happen. Security should be part of the deployment from the very start point, even from the stage of architecturing, right, to the very end. So you cannot be like it's shown in this picture on the right, that you just do it at the very end, and it's like a lot to handle at the end. Next is the manual policy enforcement. Now, a lot of people, since they see like there could be a baseline which is very small, and they think that this could be manually enforced for our organization and cloud workloads. So they go for manual policy enforcement, but this should not happen because we as humans do make mistakes, and if that costs something to the organization on millions of dollars, and that should not be happening at all. Fourth is the over reliance on the preventive guardrails. To explain it for an overview right now, we will dig deep in the future slides. So there are guardrails that if I say preventive guardrail, it means something that you stop a user from happening at the very first place. So you should not just be relying on these guardrails. You should also deal with a maybe and a no case, right? For the user to work on, and this should be done on an automated basis to ensure the compliance in the organization. Next is a big mistake, positioning your security team as an adversary to developers. That is a wrong scenario, but we do see a lot of pushback for the security teams across the organizations. They are more like the hinders to the development, but that is not how it should be. Security team should be working with the developers, and it's a combined effort for the security, because security is the responsibility for by everyone, not just for the security team. Security team still obsessed with network controls only. This is bad, because gone are the days when you say, a WAF is enough for securing my workloads, or say maybe I put 4 WAF together and I'm like, okay, I'm secure. Now, this is not how the scenario is today. Identities is one of the most important cornerstone today that we see. So the obsession from the network controls have to be shifted. Not that network controls are not important, but the scope is widened now. Okay, now, if one thing that you say that I want to take back from this presentation today, I would request you all to that would be like CSPM, because the role of CSPM has been widening as cloud security evolves. So CSPM, to define, it is a continuous process of cloud security improvement and adaptation to reduce the likelihood of a successful attack. So the idea is that now you as an organization, a lot of people would have been facing this question that, when management asks you for a secure, and you are like, if the baseline is 85%, maybe you are in around that. But if they increase to 90, you have to really work hard to maintain that secure score. And that is where CSPM and everything comes into the picture, where you have to deal with the baseline secure score for your organization. Now, the need for the cloud security posture management is one of the very first thing is it helps in the continuous assessment. So it continuously monitors your cloud environments, and it identifies all the risk and vulnerabilities it has. Now, it could be because of misconfigurations also. So all of this comes as part of the continuous assessment. Vulnerability identification. So if a thing by a user takes place, and you see that it is not as per the standards of the organization in terms of security you look forward to, then it can be easily identified through your CSPM tooling. Next is the misconfiguration detection. Like I said, it helps to identify and corrects your misconfigurations to prevent the cloud breaches. And so the CSPM, since it gives a wider view to the visibility of the controls across your cloud resources, it is very easy with CSPM. Compliance monitoring, automated remediation, it helps to swiftly correct your issues, and also it gives you recommendations also. Like if I particularly talked about, say, AWS, then they actually have proper documentation to tell you and refer back for remediation of those uh, uh, vulnerabilities also, or misconfigurations. Recommendations for hardening. So these cloud providers also come with a basic hardening for your cloud infrastructure, and they suggest you to follow these for a more secure infrastructure. Okay, now let us consider this scenario. Now you open your cloud platform and you see something like this. You see 1,300 plus unhealthy resources, and your healthy is way behind. And this is alarming because you have a lot of high findings, a lot of medium findings, and few low findings as well. And this is scary, right? For two reasons. First, because it is somewhere opening a attack surface for the hackers to come in and do the thing. And secondly, where you stand today, you have to improve, because you remember your management might be asking for a secure score. So you have to improvise on this. And this is a huge problem. So how do we start, right? So the idea is we break down into easy and impactful steps. We begin very small. We take few controls as a baseline. We start. We take only on the few focus areas we start with, and then over time we start building and maturing. And we now, to keep track of all of this, we have dashboards for our use, right? This is what an ideal CSPM structure in an organization should grow over time. To understand the same from the perspective of the cloud, exactly. So for Azure, we have something called Azure Security Benchmarks, and for AWS, there's AWS Foundational Security Baseline. And now, along with CIS, also there are about, like, now they have been increasing in the recent, but say if there are about 220 plus controls in the cloud. Now, of these baselines that you see, the controls that are suggested by these clouds, what we do is we take out the controls that are of not that does not align with what we want for our organization, right? Or they are completely out of the scope. So we put those controls into disabled controls basket, right? And the rest goes into the enabled controls. Now, of these enabled controls, the ones which we think are very important for you and you want like an action to be done from the consumer's end, that's where you put them into the measured baseline. Now, this is the base that has to be followed across for your organization at the minimum security base for the cloud. So this is the measured baseline where you tell the consumer you have to act on these. And the same are reported to the CSPM dashboard. Then there's another set, which is the enabled baseline. Now, these are the baseline that you tell the consumer that, okay, once you're done with the baseline controls, if you have time, you can also include few from this list of controls, right? And that goes into the enabled baseline. You tell them you have to act on these if you can, right? If you have time and resources available on your end. Now, these are not reported on the CSPM dashboard to cut down on the noise for the consumer, but they are left active in the cloud, and the remediations are being taking place by the support teams in your organization. So that is how the functionality should be working. And over the period of time, over the quarters, over the years, you can always expand your measured baseline, taking controls from the enabled baseline. Okay, next thing is guardrails, right? And so guardrails, to define, it is the governance rules for security, operations and compliance that you define and apply across your cloud environments or to a specific group of accounts. Now, if I were to define guardrails in one liner, I would be the controls that prevent deviations from the expected behavior. And the idea is, now when we saw the controls that came from the cloud, right, there is either a yes or a no. But if what if there's a scenario of maybe, where you maybe want to allow an access to the internet, but only for services like AKS, right, which does need internet exposure. So in such case, and also to customize your controls for the organizational needs, that is where guardrails come in. Now, the difference between CSPM and guardrails is a subset of CSPM only. So to look at the benefits, now developers can, now since you have a baseline established for your organization, developers need not always be contacting you for constant input for your security in the environment that they're working on. Automating the security controls in the developers workflow, so you can put in infrastructure as code in place for security controls specifically, and then integrating the security controls into the development process, like SaaS, that pen test should not be something which is out of the scope of the development. All of these things should be embedded into the development process for the developers to also join in for security. Okay, so types of guardrails. There are two types of guardrails majorly. One is preventive guardrail. So preventive guardrail, the idea is that you stop any control from deviation at the very first place, right? You establish a intent and prevent the deployments from happening, like not going opposite to what your policies and standards say. So preventive is you stop it from happening at the very first place itself. Secondly is detective guardrails. So detective means that if, say, a control has, if a step has taken place that is against your controls, so it could be detected on your dashboards, and it is visible to the consumer easily, so that you know it is a deviation from your control list. So preventive means it's more like, I stopped this, and detective means I have found this. It's more on the visibility side of the security posture. Okay, so how do actually these things work in the organizational framework? So this is the image from the AWS cloud platform, which says that now policies, it could either, like I said, it could be either on the root level, or it could also be deployed for the accounts level. Now, if you do it on the root level, it is inherited by all the accounts that are coming under that particular root, which is your organization root. So they inherit. So baseline controls, or the measured baseline that we talked about, it should be enabled on the root level, so to ensure that all the accounts under, or all the groups under, inherits it. All the subscription, if I say in terms of the Azure terminology. So that is how it should be. Or if you think that there are set of accounts that are only used for specific use cases, for example, say for your AI workloads, then if there's a different measured baseline that you're using, so you can actually deploy those also on the account level as well. So the idea is that the guardrails that you put in place should be tailored based on your organizational requirements and compliance standards. And the DevOps pipeline and workflows should be in place in form of infrastructure as code. Very quickly, I'll also go through the patch management. So, like I said, if it's not done on timely basis, it means it has that you are being lagging behind. So, it is very important that you maintain a timely patch for your cloud workloads. Also, there should be multi-layered defense, right? There should be defense from starting from your networks to IAM to data encryption to data storage. Everything has to be done in a multi-layered defense order. Next is now to avoid a leaking storage bucket, or to maintain the data, that the data you're maintaining in the bucket, to ensure that it is safe. The very first the idea is to not make those buckets public, and to give access to only those which actually need, like on the higher management groups, not on the user level. Lastly, it is to guide the users towards the secure configurations and behavior. And all of this can be done through guardrails where you try to change the behavior of a user for the cloud. Next is the software supply chain vulnerabilities. So here the idea is that you secure your code, also the dependencies when you talk about third-party tools, say some open source libraries that you're using in your code base. Your passkeys and everything needs to be secured. Now, when it comes to platforms like GitHub or GitLab, they do have integrations in place. But if you're using some other third-party tool which might not be using a passkey or a secret protection, then it needs to be enabled at the very base. And AI integrations with interfaces. Now, I do hear a lot of baselines coming in for AI, but ideally it is similar to what cloud does. Today, we take the infrastructure from the cloud providers, run our own application on those infrastructure, right? So that is a similar scenario what we do with AI. We take the compute from these providers and we are running our models on that compute. So the AI integrations with interfaces does include supply chain on the same level as cloud workloads. Lastly, and it is automated enforcement and compliance monitoring. So to give you an example, like I said that identities are the first line of defense. So to give an example, say if I have an IAM permission and it is granted to a user, right? That is a common case. Now, if there is a automation enforcement or a guardrail in place, what will happen is, say this activity is stored in a CloudWatch event, now which triggers the Lambda. Now this Lambda has code which gets into the CloudTrail and checks the API calls that are being made by this user. So the CloudWatch, once the CloudWatch event is registered, it triggers the Lambda. The Lambda goes and checks into the CloudTrail for all the API permissions done by the user. And this at the end could maybe create a security ticket for your management monitoring teams, that maybe this user has over excessive permissions, or maybe a message to your Slack or Teams channel, to make the visibility come in place. Now, this is a very basic example. I know this is already part of something called AWS Access Analyzer, but the idea here is to tell how the automated enforcement works. Okay, so here we come to the end of this presentation. To conclude and to mention few takeaways for you all from this session today, I would say security is the responsibility of all. It's not just the security team. It is also responsibility as an organization to secure our information, PIE, and resources. Next is with the explore. Now we see a lot of edge cutting technologies coming into place. It is very important that you keep exploring all of these and see how you can reshape your cloud landscape so that you are not opening a surface or a very common attack path for your cloud resources. And lastly, it's a call to action for adopting proactive approach to cloud security and leveraging guardrails and CSPM as a foundational element to cloud governance. And that's like one of my favorites to talk about. So thank you so much for attending this session today. And if you have any questions, please put it in the chats, or if you would like to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well for your questions, that would be I would be happy to help there as well. So thank you so much for joining, and hope you have a great day with the conference today at Day of Security India. Thank you.